Hi, Hans. It is so good to see you again.
Hi.
Everyone, this is Hans Lasso from Denmark, and he has a business called ATKIS, which stands for
Active uncertainty.
fantastic. And that is really key, right? Being the active involvement around uncertainty and really embedding that.
Leverage. Yeah.
Leverage.
The most important risk management strategy you will ever have is exploit.
And people hate that word sometimes because it has
Okay.
such a
Leverage.
negative connotation to it.
Leverage.
Leverage. I like it. I like it. All right. So today we're going to talk about how to use Monte Carlo simulations to support decision making. And
Yeah.
I know that this is a favorite topic of yours because it talks about using the data and the quantitative side of things. So
yes,
we're going to have fun with this one. So describe to you what is Monte Carlo simulation and modeling?
It's a tool. It's an approach. It's named after the city, and it was actually developed by a World War I prisoner, English prisoner, in 1912, 13, 14, something like that. That's going to be between 14 and 18, where he used the approach to calculate or find decimals of pi. I mean, there's nothing else you can do. So yeah, he was working with that one. Later, computer systems came on and a lot of things are happening, and it's used widely. What it does is that it allows you to make a model of your performance. Could be a budget. And then you put uncertainties on the different levels. We have a sales. We budget for a sales of 2 billion. Fine. You know you're not going to sell 2 billion, comma 000. So it's going to be somewhere between 1,900 and 2,200. Probably 2 billion. Okay. So we have that uncertainty. We have one on the discount structure and the cost of goods sold and the distribution, all the different things. You can model these different, put ranges on top of that. Now, some of these things will be good and some of them will be bad, and there will be things coming in. And what you then do is you ask the computer to come up with 10,000 random things. Could be 5,000, 25,000, doesn't matter. But I normally use 10,000 different scenarios. Now you tell me, what's the likelihood? We have a budgeted bottom line of $250 million. What's the likelihood we will actually meet that? What's the likelihood it will be 400? What's the likelihood that we will be in red figures? And now we have a discussion about the performance of the company. And then once we have that model, we can start adding in the risks. This could happen. We can get a strike on a factory, on a fire on a factory. What will then happen? How will that impact? And build that into the model and making the model gradually more and more advanced, more and more real life, and ending up being a tool to predict within which range your outcome will be. And yes, some of the ranges will be very wide, wider than you think. Yes, but that's life. It will happen. And if executives challenge you and say, there's no way we can get red figures, we're so well consolidated, we're doing so well, you just take one or two or three of the scenarios that actually did come out with a negative bottom line and show, okay, if this, and that happened the same year, and it could, not likely, but it could, then you're in red figures. Yeah. Even if that and that good thing happened at the same time, you're still being red figure. Yeah, okay, maybe. Most companies are much closer to losing their profitability, so they will have a significant risk of being negative, being in negative. But now you have a tool that you can show that based on the data that you have, and you have the facts, so you might as well leverage them and put them into the model.
That makes total sense. So I know in a previous conversation we were talking about some of the skill sets people need to bring to the table, and you had mentioned some basic statistics.
Yes.
To be able to handle the data. That is where this is coming in, is to be able to
exactly. You need to
all that data.
Yes, you need to have a gut feeling, have some basic training that tells you, in this case, I actually can do with a triangular distribution. In that case, I need a log normal distribution. You need to have that basic understanding of ranges and stochastic distributions and stuff, probabilities and stuff like that. If that is all mumbo jumbo to you, you're in trouble.
So we have a 90% confidence interval that we are going to hit
Yeah.
this range.
Yes.
That's your statistics coming out
Yes.
and
Exactly.
saying
It's
we are
not complicated.
90% confident that we can hit this goal.
Yes. Yeah. It's not very complicated, but you need to have that that approach that allows you to leverage the Monte Carlo simulations.
And if you as a risk manager have more of the people side and the not so quantitative skill sets, the statistics side of things, go get some for one, but then go get somebody on your team.
Yeah.
Even if you yourself don't have it, that's where you can get someone on your team
Yes.
that at least
You
has
can
it.
also help yourself, which is what I did, because I knew statistics that I just didn't know when I started. I just didn't know I needed it. You get Douglas Hubbard's The Failure of Risk Management, Why It's Broken, How to Fix It. And you get another one of his called How to Measure Anything. You read those two books. Once you have those, you understand the basics of how you're doing it. Then you find some software package that you put on top of Excel. The most common ones are At Risk from Palisades and Model Risk from both software. And you get one of those. The easy first step is to get the basic edition of the Model Risk, because that's for free. And you can work with that and get acquainted with it before you decide whether you actually want to pay for something. And it's not for free for a trial, it's free for good, the basic edition. But there's a lot of things you can't do, but others can, but you don't need that to begin with. And then you start experimenting, and then you start working with it. I'm an engineer by training. I love solving issues. When I was introduced to Monte Carlo simulation, I had so much fun. My wife hated me because suddenly our private budget was Monte Carlo simulated. Our pension plan was Monte Carlo simulated. Everything was Monte Carlo simulated. Because I thought it was so much fun. And I was supported by the executive committee because I was starting working with that and explaining how I was doing it, how I was consolidating these risks. And the CEO said, that's the right way to doing it, which meant everybody else shut up. Nobody opposed the CEO on that one. And I thought that was fast. He came up with that. How did he know that? And coming back from the meeting, back to my office, I said, oh yeah, that's right. The guy has a PhD in mathematical game theory. This is kid stuff to him. So he actually knew exactly what I was doing.
That's a bonus, probably a rare circumstance for you.
Yeah, that was a rare. That was a lift.
So are there certain types of organizations that are better equipped to take advantage of Monte Carlo simulations?
No, that would actually assume that some of them couldn't. And there are no organizations that cannot leverage it. They may not, if you take the hospitals again and say our purpose is to save lives, or schools, our purpose is to turn out graduates and stuff like that. They may not simulate on money. They may have other metrics, but any metric can be measured. Any metric can be used. It doesn't have to be money.
So one of the constraints, though, is going to be data and having it organized, right? To be able to use it in your simulations.
Yeah.
So,
but if your key performance indicator is how many patients do we run through ER in a week or in a month or something like that, and how many do we turn down or don't we get through, and if that is your key risk indicators, then you can start Monte Carlo simulating. What will it take for this number to go up or down? What's the risks and the likelihood of that happening? And you can model that. Oh, there's a doctor sick, fewer through, and all that stuff. Longer waiting lists. So you can Monte Carlo simulate anything that you can measure. And you can, as Dr. Hubbard said, measure anything.
Anything. Okay. So where would information from the Monte Carlo simulation come from? I know you were just talking about the key performance indicators. Are there other pieces of information or sources of information that you would recommend, especially for companies starting out?
Yeah, starting out depends on where you're starting. What are you starting with? And then you start asking, how do you know you're successful? What's your metric for success? That is a metric you can Monte Carlo simulate. I mean, there's no point in simulating. You have 18 risks, somewhere between 18 and 25 risks. Who cares? I mean, what does that mean to us? What you do care about is performance. So you say, my performance criteria is this. How do I measure that? I measure it this way. Okay, so now you know whether you're successful or not successful. And then you start measuring all of your risks and all of your uncertainties based on that key parameter. And go from there. And you will have data on a lot of stuff. In any organization, they have a lot of different data. Ask the specialists, ask the people actually working with this and say, okay, how do you measure that? How do you know that? Where do you gauge that? Oh, we have these data, we have those data. Okay, then start looking at those data. In the end, if you really don't have anything, and you do have companies that walk through life in total ignorance because they never catch data on anything, they're there, not for long, but they're there. You can start asking the specialists, what do you think? This number here is 500. What's the minimum number you are 95% certain it's going to be? It's a very small 5%, 2% chance it's below 350. What's the best it can be? Well, there's a very small chance in awkward places it could be more. Well, it could be 650, couldn't be 620. And then you challenge that and you talk about them with that, but now you have a range and you can use what is most commonly used in that case, a PERT distribution with those three parameters, and you have your distribution, you have your rollout. But that's your last resort. Your first resort is data, the second resort is data, the third is data, and then the fourth, if you have nothing else, then you ask people.
Well, and even then, they're going to have experience in having numbers, yes. Right? So yes. Even if it's a paper copy of a report, you can say, well, over the last 2 years, here's how the data has come out. So we can tell you, here's 24 months worth of data right here, a data point.
Yes. One of my key points is that when you're looking at projects and how they're running through, why are IT projects always late? I started in IT in 1981. That's 39 years ago. And at that point in time, I was told that IT project management is you take a huge project, you cut it up in bits, you plan every bit, you find out how much time the whole thing is, and you multiply it with 3. Because it's always going to take more time. What does that multiply by 3? What would happen if you were able to multiply by 2? Yeah. Or just add 10% because you knew what was happening. And they still haven't gotten it. They're still multiplying by 3.
Yeah.
Or delivering late. Building projects, same thing.
They multiply by 3 and then they still deliver late after the multiplying by 3. That's the crazy part. Yeah. No,
building projects, they always over budget. Why? Well, because to get the contract in to begin with, they come up with an estimate that they know is too low. And then once they've started, they assume that they can ask for more money. Because now you have your hand on a cooking plate anyway. So it's kind of a business model. I would kill the company that did that to me. If I had a building project and say, okay, this is what you believe. Yeah, okay, now you put your hand on the plate. If it's anything here, the first thing we do is we take every extra dollar that we need to build the thing from your bottom line, not from my bottom line. Once you exhaust it and on the brink of bankruptcy, then I start feeding in money. But not until that. So yeah, you die if you
price contract.
Yes.
I've actually seen companies do it, and it's amazing how well it works to get an accurate budget. Yeah, I agree.
Yes.
I agree. So what skill sets does a company need to utilize, in order for them to be able to utilize Monte Carlo simulation outside of the statistics that we just talked about?
Nothing. There are no extra skills they need. They just need the insights from people who are there in the first place and people who know where the data are. Oh, you want to measure that? We have a figure out here, over here. You want to see, want to have a predictive indicator of world growth. Tricky, yeah. Look at the number of orders of big trucks. The number of orders in big trucks precedes the GDP development with about 6 to 9 months. So if the order drops down, as it did in the financial crisis, by the way, before the housing price went bust, 6 months before that, orders for big trucks plummeted, and then went the market. So yes, you can get data. Very good insights in the 2 books from Doug Hubbard on where to get, how to get data, and so forth. Also, the fact that you need less than you think.
You always need less data than you think you do, right? I think
Now,
that's
the more data you have, the more safe you are statistically, and the better distribution you can find to be accurate. Sure. But you need very few data to get a distribution that is accurate enough. Doug Hubbard talks about the value of information. Now, you can get an information that is, you can spend a ton of money on getting an information that is absolutely spot on. For 10% of that money, you can get an almost accurate number or range out of it. And if you look at the 2 ranges, the decisions that comes out of the executive office based on the 2 is exactly the same. Then the total accuracy is a waste of money. It's a waste of money to try to be that precise. It makes you feel good. Yeah, great. How much money are you going to pay for feeling good? Well, sometimes you do, but yeah, not in business. But basically, yes, you need data enough to ensure that you drive the right decision.
and you save the company that much money, right?
Yeah.
And time and effort.
Or make a bolder step.
Yeah.
I've been involved in decisions where product launches has been postponed because when we looked at the product development, they have made a plan. This was it. There was a buffer put in top of it and say that's the launch that we're aiming for. And then we looked at the uncertainties and the risks in the product development phase. We found that there was a 10% likelihood that we're going to meet that date, even the prolonged date. And that wasn't much. Nope. But there are 2, 3 very huge risks, very likely risks that will severely postpone your development phase. So if you want to make sure you're able to deliver at that point in time, you need to postpone your launch date.
So they did.
So they did. In other cases, the Lego Group is very much up against Christmas, and there's no such thing as postponing a launch, which means that sometimes it costs a ton of money. Yes, and it does.
But that's the price, and they understand
that's
that.
the price they pay to be able to meet. But you cannot have the marketing campaign running, the TV spots running, the shelf space allocated in the stores, and the products are not there. It's so expensive. It's an absolute dead no-go.
And not just at that instance, but also the reputation hits that you take.
No, it's a lot worse than that. If you were saying you launch March 1st on the new product line, and there's like 2 foot of shelf space available in stores, and the product is not there, storekeepers have an allergy. They hate empty shelves. So they would take whatever they have and put them on your empty shelves to have a vibrant business and a vibrant store. 1 week later, your product arrives. Just 4 days later, your product arrives, and the shelves are full. They're not going to take what they have put in there away to put your new stuff in. They're going to wait until it's sold, and then they put the new stuff in. But that means your 4 days delay suddenly becomes a 3 months delay. And by then, all the kids have forgotten all about the TV commercials, and they stopped talking about the product because nobody has it. So you've lost it. Sorry. Yeah. So yes, in generally, not just the Lego Group, generally in what is called fast-moving consumer goods markets, you bend over backwards to deliver on time.
Yeah, agree. I can see that. Definitely see that. And even, I mean, that's really just all about meeting expectations.
Yes.
Right?
And having a consolidated view, using Monte Carlo simulation to consolidate all the uncertainties and give you a valid frame, a valid reference point to what's the likelihood you will be able to meet your delivery date. What are key issues that you can address in order to support that, coming out of the other part of the tornado or the Monte Carlo analysis, with what is called a tornado diagram, where you get a ranking of the uncertainties that you have by how important they are to your end result.
Well, and that really gets back to use your example of they're willing to spend the money in order to meet the deadline. That's because they have a very low tolerance for missing that
Yes,
deadline. So they are
yes,
taking action, making decisions based on their tolerance. But it's all
yes.
based on the data that you've been able to provide them with the Monte Carlo simulation.
We have been, at the Lego Group, we have been flying products, finished products, toys, to the US or to Asia to meet with the trucks that drove them directly into the stores. I mean, we've bent over backwards to make it.
Wow. Well, it's what you have to do. It's what you have to do.
Yeah.
Um, so we were talking about the skill sets, and you said you don't need any additional skill sets. You need to have that statistics background. If people feel like they're going to be overwhelmed with data that they don't feel like one person can manage, or just trying to get their arms around it, are there other areas within an organization that can be leveraged without having to add to the ERM staff?
No, but I don't think you need to. What you do out of the Monte Carlo simulation, you don't present the Monte Carlo simulation. You don't stop. I mean, consultants are very bad at this. They start telling you how hard they worked and how good they are and how much references they have. You have hired them. You basically don't care. You're looking into this, and now you're telling them not how you got to the results. You basically assume they trust you to do the right thing.
Right.
So what you tell them is the likelihood that you're going to meet your target is there's a 30% likelihood that you will meet your strategic objective. Are you happy with that? No? Okay. Here's what you can do about it. Here's the key issues that you should address to do something about it. And I've looked at the talked to some specialists, and some of the ideas that we've gotten up with are these and those.
And that was a great example of a framework for a conversation of how ERM needs to be
Exactly.
talking with executives.
Don't report on risks. Nobody cares. Report on likelihood of meeting targets.
It's a twist in the frame of reference.
Yes.
It's
But it's
not
talking
about,
business. It's talking business language. Executives don't care about risk. They care about performance.
right. Even though in our mind, it's like, well, we're doing enterprise risk management, so we need to talk about the risks that are getting managed, right? No.
No.
It's actually about just managing the enterprise.
It's actually about managing it's actually about performance managing the enterprise.
Yeah.
Yes.
Great point. Great point.
I would like to, and it's going to be an uphill battle, and I'm going to make it in my lifetime, change the concept of risk management into one of performance assurance.
That's a very laudable goal. I am with you on that one. I can help you. We'll work on that. We'll talk about that. So what are your thoughts on convincing executives that Monte Carlo simulation is worth it? And I'm thinking about it from the perspective of companies who have historically done qualitative assessments, have not used data. Now they're going to have to shift in their way of approach. Is there any convincing that needs to be done with the executive?
They don't have to change anything. You do. You leverage, go ahead and do it. I mean, model risk is for free. Get the tool, look at the tutorials. They're actually rather good for both of the software packages, both at risk and model risk. Look at the tutorials, try it out, figure it out, use a model, have it validated and so forth. Maybe talk to a peer or somebody, or even ask the consulting or the vendor company about this, and have applied, and then apply it and say, okay, I have to, and then go to the executive and say, instead of using these humanly biased qualitative things where you don't agree on how difficult this is and how big this is and so forth, we have started using data instead and facts instead. And we have analyzed this using a mathematical approach I don't want to bother you with. What we come out with is a result where we can tell you there's a 30% likelihood that you will meet your target.
So a great point in what you just said is basically not having to go to the executives ahead of time and get their approval to change your approach. Instead, it's just change your approach.
Yeah.
And do it and tell them, you know that you didn't like this part.
The only approval you need to get is from your direct boss. I mean, don't step on his toes and present something new he's never heard about. tell him what this is and talk about it to him. Show him. I mean, give him an example. Show him this is what we can do now. Get him excited about this reporting likelihood of meeting targets. And say, okay, with this agreement, I will now do it here. And then go to an area, to a project, to a decision, wherever, and talk to those guys and convince them, let's try this. Let's see what it brings us. And then go ahead and do it with that one and start reporting on it.
And I think the outcome of those conversations will be mind-blowing, not just for the ERM professionals, because it is a shift in reference.
Yes.
The mental reference, as well as the decisions that will get made, instead of conversations focusing on, well, I don't agree with this score or this score and where it falls in the ranking. Instead, that doesn't matter.
No.
That doesn't matter.
Sorry, guys, these are the facts.
The outcome.
I was working with one company that was looking for their sales and operation planning. And they were working with ranges that were too narrow, way too narrow. They were looking at, this has a 5% upside and a 10% downside. And then you looked at the product lines that they've had in the past years and say, what did you budget for and what did you actually get? And you found that on product line level, the uncertainty was plus minus 30%. So if you plan for 100 million, it was going to be somewhere between 70 and 130. Okay, it was not going to be between 90 and 105. It was way bigger than that.
Yeah.
Okay, to address that.
So it's not just looking at what you think is a good range, but also look at your history and let history tell the story.
When you have the data, you have your history and stuff like that, you can use that to validate. You may also be in cases where you have too wide ranges and say, I can narrow that a lot because I actually know.
There you go. Okay. So how do you address potential bias in the quantitative approach? And
bias and quantitative? How can you do that? How can you have biased quantitative?
Well, I have heard, I have not experienced it myself, but people inputting numbers to basically get the result that they're looking for. When they say that here's the target that we want, and that's because they know it's an easy target. So, versus let's give us a stretch goal that we want to achieve. So how do you get around that bias that happens?
Collaborating, talking, challenging. Have one guy challenge the other guy, have a conversation about, is this really the minimum? Is this really the most likely? Is this really the maximum? And have them discuss that and say, okay, we have these 5 cases from the past where this was the range. Now you say that is the range. Why? How did you get to that? Oh, but I believe that, and so forth, and say, but with this insights, do you still believe it? Or should we just maybe change it a bit? And well, then they would generally, because they're specialists, they're not politicians, they're not executives, they are more afraid of being wrong than of losing face. Many executives, not all of them, many executives are more worried about losing face than being wrong.
So when you get the specialists in the room, they are more focused on being right.
Yes, they have a professional pride in their specialty. They want to be right. So they are adaptable, they are changeable, they are motivated to get the best quality. If you show me this, yeah, okay, I'll duly consider it. So it's not like one my wife talked about and say, I have made up my mind. Please don't confuse me with facts. So, yeah.
So I think one of those elements that you just brought up is the asking the questions, challenging assumptions. Again, those 2 major roles of why ERM exists.
Yes.
To ask questions and challenge, but not just with the executives and everything, but also with the specialists. But
more with the specialists. Don't ask executives questions and then give them the answers they have just given you. I mean, it's the wrong approach. They don't serve you, you serve them.
Right. Well, the other element is with the specialists, let them know that you are their voice to the executive. So you're going to help, champion their causes. You see a problem, let's talk about that. Let's figure out how we can communicate that with the executives. And by the way, we're going to use the data that you are
Yeah.
so well familiar with, that executives see reports in these certain contexts all the time. We're going to apply that data in a totally different way.
Yeah.
Right. And apply it to the
Yes.
performance piece of it.
We want to leverage.
Static indicator.
Yeah, we want to leverage the facts that we have.
Right. Got it. So, what are some common challenges that organizations experience when they try to use Monte Carlo simulation?
I think, actually, I don't know. I have to say bluntly, I don't know what kind of challenges they have. The ones that I have seen started using it. The risk manager came back to me and said it was a game changer, complete game changer for them. They could struggle with organizational pushback and stuff like that. But when you start small, start with somebody who will actually buy into it, you won't get that kind of pushback. You will perhaps get a project where you failed. I mean, your model was simply not valid. Okay, I've learned. Go ahead, do it again.
Try it maybe with a pilot.
Always,
it's all about piloting
small.
things.
Start small. I mean, you don't start Monte Carlo simulating your ERM. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's like being a new guy in finance with a new approach, and then you say, hey, we want to do activity-based costing. Let's do it for the entire company. No, let's just try it out for engineering and see how it works over here. Because so that we have our approach and we know that it works and can trust the approach.
So avoid any challenges by starting small.
Get challenges you can manage.
Yeah. Okay.
You shouldn't start so small that you don't get any value out of it. I mean, the failed Monte Carlo simulation is a simulation that comes out with a result, and this is a likelihood that you will not meet targets. And the executive says, exactly, I knew that. Then you've given him nothing. You've made an effort. You have nothing to show for it because he knew that.
And he still decided to proceed.
Right.
With that knowledge.
Yes.
Yeah. But then you've got to ask, so what prompted you to go ahead and proceed knowing that the chances of failure are this high? What's the opportunity side? So there's still some questions that can be asked, but not necessarily.
But if you have executives or leaders who are the Richard Branson type, they will push hard to win on a 40% chance of winning. 60-40 against? Nah, let's do it. Let's just be diligent about it. Let's know what we're doing. I can beat that. Let's do it.
Yeah, I can switch the odds to be in my favor. Kind of
no,
thing.
I can hit the 40%.
That too. All right. And then where for companies that want to start using Monte Carlo, we talked about having the small projects and getting one of either at risk or model risk to kind of start small. Is there any other recommendations for organizations that do want to start?
Start with a project in a part of the organization that are used to numbers. Operations, manufacturing, engineering, these guys are engineers. They're used to numbers anyway. Don't start in HR. HR are not used to numbers, and they will be looking at that and say, what is this thing? Monte Carlo simulation, new applicants? Forget it. They won't understand what you're doing. They have their minds is looking at something else, which is good for HR, but it's bad for statistics. So start in a place where they understand numbers, are used to work. Quality departments, flow planning departments, stuff like that are used to numbers. Leverage their own data. Say, you have this insights. How are you working with? Oh, well, not really. Well, I can give you a hint of what we could do. Take the data, make the analysis, and go back and say, this is what we actually can. I can deliver this for you. I can train you to do this and embed that in your organization. And then you're there.
Fantastic. And always start with the target in mind.
Yes.
Have your target.
Have your business target. It's about business performance.
That's right. All right. Well, thank you so much for talking about Monte Carlo. I think that it's, like you said, it's a game changer for companies to go from qualitative to quantitative.
as a risk manager, it's a tool, but it's a tool that is just as important as a screwdriver is to a carpenter. You cannot consolidate risk without Monte Carlo simulation. You cannot look at a risk portfolio without using Monte Carlo simulation. Heat maps are useless, and that's on a good day. So you need to have a proper tool for consolidation, and that's Monte Carlo simulation. There's nothing else.
Well, you know what? I'm going to bring up one other quick question since you mentioned heat maps. Board members they like their pictures, right? So and they've gotten so they've adapted to reading heat maps. How can risk managers go from that process and that type of report out to this new output that they are going to be providing? How do they manage that?
Let's assume the company have 5 strategic targets or 5 business targets for the coming year. Now you show them 5 bars, red, yellow, green, whatever, just red and yellow or green and red if you want, and say, okay, on target 1, the likelihood of meeting that one is 65%, target 2, 28%, target 3, 51%, and target 4, 92%. This is the heat map they need. This is about the performance. Now they start discussing, what is target 2? 28%. We need to do something about that. Oh yeah, the key issues we can address are these and those, and we're looking at this and we're looking at that. You need to do more. We have to go in this direction or something like that. Or you may even get back, is this target too stretched? Or can't we do it? Or has something else happened? Or whatever. But then they can start discussion. Having 6 red risks, I wonder what discussion they have at the board committee. If you have 1 red risk and 17 yellow risks, are the 17 more dangerous than the 1? Yeah. Doesn't make sense.
I understand.
So give them another picture.
That's a great point. And I love the practical advice, because that's what it should be all about. It's not about the theory. It is about the practice of it. So
I'm not an executive. I'm a practitioner. I want to just do it.
Yeah, you and me both. Yeah. That's the fun part is the doing, not just the talking about it, right?
Right.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Hans. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks.